The massive alien ship moved through space like a silent ghost. Its metal hull gleamed under the light of distant stars as it drifted toward a small blue and green planet. Inside the ship, strange creatures with blue scales and 4 arms worked at glowing control panels. Commander Zixtal stood tall on the bridge, his yellow eyes fixed on the screens in front of him. He was from a race called the Viridians, beings who had traveled between stars for thousands of years. His people were smart and careful, always studying new worlds before making contact with the life forms they found there. "Sir, we are getting close to the 3rd planet," said Science Officer Kethra. Her voice was high and musical, the way all Viridian voices sounded. She touched several buttons on her control panel, and new images appeared on the main screen. The planet looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, with brown and green land masses scattered between them. White clouds swirled across the surface in slow, peaceful patterns. It looked like many other worlds the Viridians had found before. But something was wrong with this place. "Commander, I am reading very strange energy patterns," Kethra said. Her scales turned a pale blue color, which meant she was worried. "The life forms on this planet are much bigger than they should be." Zixtal moved closer to look at the readings. Numbers and symbols scrolled across the screen, showing the size and strength of the creatures living on the world below. His eyes grew wide as he read the data. "These cannot be correct," he said slowly. "Show me the readings again." Kethra pressed more buttons. The same impossible numbers appeared on the screen. According to their instruments, the planet was full of creatures that were bigger and more dangerous than anything in their databases. Some of the readings showed beasts that were as large as their own spaceship. "Sir, many of these creatures are Class Toithine apex predators," Kethra said, her voice shaking. "Our records show that Class Toithine predators can destroy entire cities. How could any intelligent life survive on a world with so many of these monsters?" A new voice spoke from the back of the bridge. "Maybe you should ask someone who actually knows about this planet." Everyone turned to look at the human who had been sitting quietly in the corner. Dr. Jake Morrison was tall and thin, with brown hair and green eyes. The Galactic Council had forced the Viridians to bring one human with them on this mission, even though most aliens thought humans were too young and stupid to be useful. Jake stood up and walked over to look at the screens. He was wearing simple clothes that looked very plain compared to the fancy uniforms of the alien crew. But his eyes were bright and alert as he studied the data. "These readings are from Earth," Jake said calmly. "My home planet." The bridge became very quiet. Even the soft humming sounds of the ship's engines seemed to get quieter. All the alien crew members stared at Jake with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You come from this world of monsters?" Zixtal asked. Jake laughed, which made several of the aliens step backward. Human laughter was a sound that most other species found disturbing. "We don't call them monsters," Jake said. "We just call them animals." "Animals?" Kethra's voice went even higher. "These creatures show energy signatures that match our most powerful war beasts. Some of them are larger than our battle tanks. They have weapons that could cut through starship armor." "Yeah, some of them are pretty big," Jake agreed. "But they're still just animals. They eat, they sleep, they take care of their babies. Just like animals everywhere." The aliens looked at each other with confused expressions. In all their years of space travel, they had never met a species that lived alongside such dangerous creatures without fear. "Show me the surface," Zixtal ordered. The main screen changed to show a view of the planet's surface. The camera focused on a large area covered with trees and grass. At first, everything looked peaceful and quiet. Then something moved between the trees. It was huge. The creature was at least 30 feet long, with massive legs that shook the ground when it walked. Its skin was covered in thick, dark scales that looked harder than metal. Sharp claws the size of swords extended from its feet, and its mouth was filled with teeth like daggers. The alien crew gasped and stepped back from the screen. Even through the safety of their spaceship, the sight of such a beast filled them with terror. "Class 15 apex predator," Kethra whispered. "The deadliest classification in our system." But then they saw something that made no sense at all. Small figures were moving near the giant beast. The camera zoomed in to show that these figures were humans, They walked calmly near the monster, completely unafraid. Some of them even seemed to be following it. "This is impossible," Dr. Yulvan said. He was the ship's expert on animal behavior, and his purple skin had turned almost white with shock. "Those humans should be running. That creature's body language shows that it is hunting. Why are they not afraid?" Jake moved closer to the screen and smiled. "Because they're not in danger. Look at the way the animal is moving. It's not hunting, it's just walking through its territory." "How can you tell?" Zixtal demanded. "Experience," Jake said simply. "We grew up with these animals. We learned how to read their body language, how to know when they're angry or just curious. Most of the time they ignore us completely." The aliens watched in amazement as more footage appeared on the screen. They saw humans swimming in oceans filled with massive sea creatures. They saw children playing in areas where deadly predators roamed freely. They saw old people sitting calmly while beasts that could destroy cities walked past them. "Your species has no sense of self-preservation," Zixtal said, his voice filled with wonder and horror. "Or maybe we just understand our world better than you think," Jake replied. The observation of Earth continued for hours. Every new piece of footage showed the same impossible thing: humans living peacefully alongside creatures that should have killed them all long ago. The alien crew grew more and more confused as they watched. Finally, Zixtal turned away from the screens. His yellow eyes were wide with disbelief. "Prepare the long-range observation post," he ordered. "We need to study this planet much more carefully before we make any decisions about contact." "How long should we observe them, sir?" Kethra asked. Zixtal looked back at the screen, where a human child was now riding on the back of a creature that looked like a living weapon. "As long as it takes to understand how they are still alive," he said quietly. 3 days passed as the alien ship stayed hidden behind one of Earth's moons. The crew watched the planet through their powerful telescopes and scanning equipment. Every hour brought new footage that made less sense than the last. Commander Zixtal sat in his chair on the bridge, staring at the reports that covered his desk. Each report told the same impossible story. Humans were living with creatures that should have eaten them years ago. Day 3 observation log. He spoke into his recording device. "The human species continues to display behavior that goes against every rule of survival we know. They walk among predators that could kill them in seconds. They show no fear of creatures that would send our best warriors running." Kethra looked up from her station. "Sir, I have more footage from the water areas." "Show me," Zixtal said, though he was not sure he wanted to see more proof of human insanity. The main screen lit up with images of Earth's oceans. Blue water stretched as far as the camera could see. Then dark shapes began moving under the surface. The shapes were huge, with fins like sharp blades and mouths full of terrible teeth. "Sharks," said Lieutenant Ben Carter, the human military officer who had joined their crew. He was eating something he called a sandwich and seemed completely calm. "Great whites by the look of them." "Those aquatic hunters have multiple rows of serrated cutting implements in their oral cavities," Kethra said, using the formal scientific words her people preferred. "They demonstrate advanced hunting patterns and show signs of tactical intelligence." "Yeah, they're pretty smart," Ben agreed. "Some humans like to swim with them." The entire bridge went silent except for the soft beeping of computers. Several aliens made choking sounds. "Swim with them?" Dr. Yulvan asked in a voice that was barely a whisper. "Voluntarily?" "Sure. It's fun. You just have to know what you're doing." On the screen, a human in a black suit was indeed swimming near the massive sharks. The person moved slowly and calmly through the water while the deadly predators circled around. The sharks could have attacked at any moment, but instead they seemed almost curious about their human visitor. "This defies all logic," Zixtal muttered. "Those creatures are designed by nature to kill and consume other life forms. Why are they not attacking?" "Because they're not hungry and the human isn't acting like prey," Jake Morrison explained. He had been watching the footage with interest. "Sharks mostly attack when they mistake humans for seals or when they feel threatened. This diver knows how to move in a way that doesn't trigger their hunting instincts. But the risk," Kethra said, her scales turning pale blue again. "One mistake and the human would be consumed." "Life has risks," Ben said with a shrug. Doesn't mean you stop living. More footage appeared on the screen. This time it showed humans on land, in places the aliens had marked as extremely dangerous. A woman was walking through tall grass while massive striped cats stalked nearby. The cats were bigger than the hover cars the aliens used for transportation, with claws that could slice through steel. Tigers, Jake said before anyone could ask. Beautiful animals. Beautiful? Yulvan's purple skin was now completely white. Those felines possess retractable claws measuring over 4 inches in length. Their jaw strength can crush bones. They are perfect killing machines. They're also endangered, Jake said sadly. There aren't many left. Humans work very hard to protect them. Protect them? Zixtel could not believe what he was hearing. You protect creatures that could kill you? Of course, they're part of our world. Without predators like tigers, the balance of nature gets messed up. Too many plant-eaters would destroy the forests. The alien stared at Jake as if he had just said that fire was cold or that space was not dark. The idea of protecting dangerous predators was completely foreign to their way of thinking. The observation continued. They watched humans working, with massive elephants that could crush buildings. They saw people riding on the backs of creatures that looked like living tanks. They recorded footage of humans hand-feeding animals that registered as biological weapons on their scanners. Sir, Kethra said during the second week of observation, I have found something very disturbing. More disturbing than everything else we have seen, Zixtal asked. Yes, sir. Much more disturbing. The screen changed to show an area the computer identified as Africa. Dense jungle covered the land, broken by small clearings where humans had built simple shelters. Everything looked peaceful and normal. Then something moved in the shadows between the trees. It was enormous. The creature stood 15 feet tall at its shoulders, with a body that was 30 feet long. Its skin was thick and gray, covered in bony plates that looked like natural armor. Sharp spines ran along its back, and its tail ended in a cluster of deadly spikes. Classification unknown, the computer announced. Threat level maximum. Recommend immediate withdrawal from observation zone. The beast stepped into the clearing, where human children were playing. The aliens watched in horror, expecting to witness a massacre. The creature's eyes glowed red in the sunlight, and saliva dripped from its massive jaws. But the human children did not run. Instead, they looked up at the monster and smiled. Hello, Rex, one of the children called out, waving at the creature. The massive beast lowered its head toward the children. For a moment, it looked like it might attack. Then, impossibly, it made a sound that was almost like purring. One of the children reached up and patted the creature's snout. Impossible, Dr. Yulvan whispered. The pheromone readings indicate that creature is a Class 15th apex predator. It should view those children as prey items. Maybe it does, Ben said. But it also recognizes them as friends. Friends? Kethra's voice cracked. How can prey be friends with predator? Same way anything can be friends with anything else, Jake answered. You spend time together. You learn to trust each other. You show respect. On the screen, more children had appeared. They were playing some kind of game around the massive creature, running between its legs and climbing on its back. The beast seemed to enjoy the attention, moving carefully to avoid stepping on the small humans. This violates every principle of evolutionary biology, Yulvan said. Predators do not form emotional attachments to potential prey species. Tell that to humans who keep cats and dogs, Jake said with a smile. Cats and dogs are domesticated companion animals, Zixtal protested. They have been bred for thousands of generations to live with humanoids. So, these animals have been living with humans for thousands of generations too, just not in cages. The observation period stretched into its 3rd week. Every day brought new evidence that humans were either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish. They lived alongside creatures that could destroy entire cities. They swam with sea monsters. They walked through territories claimed by apex predators, and somehow, they survived. I do not understand, Zixtal said to Jake on the 21st. Day of observation. Your species should have been extinct long ago. How do you survive on a world filled with such dangers? Jake thought for a moment before answering. Maybe we survive because we don't see them as dangers. We see them as neighbors. Neighbors who could eat you. Neighbors who choose not to, Jake corrected. That's what makes them good neighbors. Zixtal looked back at the screen where a human farmer was casually shooing away a creature that could level city blocks. The beast obediently moved away from the crops like a well-trained pet. Your species, Zixtal said slowly, is either blessed by the gods or completely insane. Maybe both, Jake replied with a grin that made several aliens nervous. The observation continued, but now the crew of the ship knew they were watching something that would change their understanding of intelligence, courage, and survival forever. The moment that would change everything happened on a Tuesday morning in what humans called Montana. The alien crew had been watching Earth for almost a month, and they thought they had seen every impossible thing the planet could show them. They were wrong. Lisa Park sat in her Jeep at the edge of a thick forest checking her camera equipment. She was a wildlife photographer who specialized in dangerous animals. Her job was to take pictures of creatures that most people never wanted to meet. Today she was hunting for something very special. The local rangers had been talking about a new creature in the area, something big and mean that had been scaring away all the other animals. Even the bears were avoiding this part of the forest, which meant whatever was out there was truly dangerous. Lisa had been tracking the beast for 3 days. She found huge footprints in the mud, claw marks on trees that were 10 feet off the ground, and the remains of meals that suggested something with very big teeth lived nearby. On the alien ship, the crew watched Lisa through their long-range cameras. They had been following her progress with growing alarm. The human female is entering the territory of Specimen Alpha Death, reported Kethra, using the name their computer had given to the unknown creature. All other life forms have fled this area. Commander Zixtal studied the readings on his screen. The creature they were tracking showed energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. It was bigger than most buildings, stronger than their battle mechs, and angrier than a wounded war beast. What classification should we assign to this creature? Asked Dr. Yulvan. The computer suggests Class 17th, Kethra answered. Planet killer level. A shocked silence filled the bridge. Class XD8 was a theoretical classification that they had never seen in real life. Such creatures were supposed to be impossible, too dangerous to exist without destroying their entire ecosystem. Sir, said Lieutenant Ben Carter, maybe we should warn Lisa about what she's walking into. She cannot hear our transmissions, Zixtal replied. And even if she could, would she listen? Jake Morrison looked up from the human equipment he had been studying. Probably not. Lisa's pretty determined when she's after a good shot. A good shot of what will likely be her final moments, Yulvan muttered. On the screen, Lisa had stopped her Jeep and was now walking into the forest on foot. She carried only her camera, a small backpack, and the kind of calm confidence that made aliens question human sanity. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds sang in the trees. No small animals rustled in the bushes. Even the insects seemed to have gone silent. It was the kind of silence that meant something very dangerous was nearby. Lisa noticed the quiet, but it did not seem to worry her. She moved carefully through the trees, her camera ready, looking for any sign of the creature she was tracking. On the alien ship, sensors were going crazy. Massive life form approaching the human female, Kethra announced, her voice tight with worry. Distance decreasing rapidly. How rapidly, Zixtal demanded. It will reach her in 30 seconds. The alien crew watched in horror as something huge began moving through the forest toward Lisa. Trees bent and broke as the creature pushed through them. The ground shook with each step it took. Should we intervene? Asked Ben. We could teleport her out of there. Zixtal's hand moved toward the emergency controls, but he hesitated. The Galactic Council had strict rules about interfering with primitive species. But watching someone die when they could prevent it felt wrong. Prepare the emergency teleporter, he ordered. If she shows any sign of distress, we extract her immediately. Lisa had found a good spot behind a fallen log where she could set up her camera. She was adjusting the lens settings when she heard the creature approaching. The sound was like thunder mixed with the roar of an earthquake. She looked up and saw it emerging from the trees. The beast was even bigger than the reports had suggested. It stood 20 feet tall and was nearly 40 feet long. Its skin was black as night and covered with natural armor that looked like it could stop artillery shells. Red eyes the size of dinner plates glowed with intelligence and hunger. Sharp claws extended from its feet, each one longer than a sword. Its mouth opened to reveal rows of teeth that looked like they belonged in a nightmare. Acid saliva dripped from its jaws, burning holes in the ground where it landed. The creature had clearly been hunting, and now it had found prey. On the alien ship, every alarm was sounding. Class 19th, threat confirmed, the computer announced. Recommend immediate planetary evacuation. By the sacred moons, whispered Yulvan. That thing could destroy an entire city. The creature locked its burning red eyes on Lisa and let out a roar that shook the forest. Birds flew away from trees miles away. The sound was so loud and terrifying that several aliens on the ship had to cover their ears. Lisa looked up at the monster and did something that broke every rule of survival in the galaxy. She sighed in annoyance. "Oh, come on," she said, lowering her camera. "I was trying to get a good shot." The creature roared again and began charging toward her. Its massive feet left craters in the ground. Trees snapped like twigs as it crashed through the forest. Nothing could survive what was coming next. Lisa stood up, brushed dirt off her pants, and walked directly toward the charging monster. "This cannot be happening," Kethra whispered. The beast was moving at full speed now, its claws extended, its mouth open wide enough to swallow a vehicle. It was 3 seconds away from crushing Lisa into the ground. 2 seconds, 1 second. Lisa raised her hand and brought it down sharply on the creature's snout with a loud slapping sound. "Bad," she said firmly, the way someone might scold a misbehaving dog. "No charging. Down." The alien bridge fell into complete silence. Even the computer stopped beeping. Everyone stared at the screen in shock. The massive creature, the planet killer that could destroy cities, stopped charging. It blinked its huge red eyes and looked confused. Then, impossibly, it sat down on its haunches like an enormous dog, its head lowered until it was almost touching the ground. If the aliens did not know better, they would have said the creature looked ashamed. "Good," Lisa said, patting the monster's snout gently. "Much better. Now stay." The creature stayed. Lisa walked back to her camera, stepped over the fallen log, and began taking pictures of the beast that was now posing like a trained model. "Did that just happen?" Ben asked, his voice barely audible. "The human female just disciplined a Class 78 apex predator," Yulvan said slowly. She gave it a minor physical correction, used vocal commands, and the creature obeyed. "How is that possible?" Zixtal demanded. Jake was smiling broadly. "Lisa always was good with animals. She has a way of reading their body language, understanding what they need. That big guy wasn't really trying to hurt her. He was just being pushy, testing boundaries." "Testing boundaries?" Kethra's voice went up 3 octaves. It was demonstrating clear predatory behavior. Nah, that was dominance behavior. Big difference. He wanted to see if Lisa would back down or stand her ground. When she stood her ground and corrected him, he accepted her as the alpha. On the screen, Lisa was now taking pictures while the massive creature sat perfectly still. Occasionally, she would give it directions like, "Turn your head a little to the left" or "Try to look more natural." The beast obeyed every command. "This changes everything," Zixtal said quietly. "If humans can control creatures of this power level." "We don't control them," Jake corrected. "We communicate with them. We build relationships based on mutual respect. By slapping them? Sometimes. When they need it." The crew watched as Lisa finished her photo session and packed up her equipment. She gave the creature one final pat on the head and told it to be good. Then she walked back to her jeep and drove away. The monster watched her go, then wandered back into the forest like nothing had happened. "I need to file a report about this," Zixtal said, but his voice sounded distant and confused. "What are you going to say?" Ben asked. Zixtal thought for a long moment. "I have no idea. The incident would be replayed thousands of times in Galactic Council chambers. Scientists would study every frame of the footage. Military analysts would write reports about the implications of human-predator relationships. But none of them would ever truly understand what the aliens had witnessed that day. They had seen a human being treat the galaxy's most dangerous predator like a misbehaving pet, and somehow make it work. It was the moment when the rest of the galaxy realized that humans were not just another species. They were something entirely new and impossible and maybe a little bit magical. And it all started with a simple slap on the nose. The video of Lisa Park slapping the massive creature traveled across the galaxy faster than light speed. Within hours, every species in the Galactic Council had seen the footage. Within days, emergency meetings were being called on 12 different worlds. Admiral Susan Hayes stood in the Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council, looking out at thousands of alien representatives. She was the first human to address the full council, and the weight of that responsibility felt heavy on her shoulders. The hall was enormous, designed to hold delegates from species of all sizes. Some aliens were tiny and needed special platforms to be seen. Others were so large they could only fit their heads through the viewing portals. The diversity was amazing, but right now, every single one of them was staring at Susan with the same expression of confused fear. "Honored delegates," Susan began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's translation systems. "I understand you have questions about my species." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of aliens began speaking at once, their voices creating a chaos of clicks, whistles, growls, and electronic beeps. The translation system struggled to keep up. General Krextos of the Altarian Defense Force was the first to gain control of the floor. He was a massive creature covered in thick armor plating, and his voice boomed like thunder when he spoke. "Human Admiral Hayes," he said formally. "My people need to understand something. The creature your female subdued in the forest measures larger than our primary battle tanks. Its claws could penetrate our strongest armor. How did she defeat it without weapons?" "She didn't defeat it," Susan replied calmly. "She communicated with it." This answer seemed to confuse the aliens even more. A representative from the Crystalline Collective, a being made of living crystal who communicated through light patterns, flashed a series of rapid questions. "The collective asks how communication is possible with a creature that shows no signs of higher intelligence," the translator announced. "Intelligence isn't just about technology or language," Susan explained. "It's about understanding your environment, learning from experience, and adapting your behavior. The creature Lisa met was very intelligent. It just expressed that intelligence differently than we do." Dr. Veltar from the Scientific Union raised one of his 6 arms. "Admiral Hayes, our biological scans indicate that creature possessed enough physical power to destroy small settlements. In our experience, such beings are driven purely by instinct to hunt and consume. How do your people override millions of years of evolutionary programming?" Susan smiled, which made several aliens step backward. Human facial expressions were still unsettling to many species. "We don't override anything," she said. "We work with it. Every animal, no matter how big or dangerous, has basic needs and behaviors. They want food, safety, territory, and sometimes companionship. If you understand those needs and respect them, you can usually find a way to coexist." "But the risk," protested Ambassador Yithala of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. Her tentacles writhed nervously as she spoke. "One miscalculation could result in death." "Living involves risk," Susan replied. "But so does hiding. On Earth, we learned long ago that running from our problems doesn't make them go away. It just makes them someone else's problem." Meanwhile, back on the observation ship, the alien crew was conducting their own investigation. They had requested permission to interview more humans about their relationships with dangerous animals. Commander Zixtel sat across from Jake Morrison in the ship's meeting room. Between them was a holographic display showing dozens of videos from Earth. "Explain this to me," Zixtal said, pointing to a video of a human child riding on the back of a creature that looked like a living siege engine. "That youngling should be terrified." That's just Billy riding his pet Triceratops, Jake said casually. His family has been raising them for generations. Raising them? You domesticate Class V mice predators? Well, Triceratops are actually herbivores, so they're not really predators. But yeah, some families specialize in working with specific species. It takes a lot of knowledge and patience. Zixtal switched to another video, this one showing an elderly human woman hand-feeding something that registered as a biological weapons platform. The creature was covered in spines and had acid dripping from its mouth. And this? Oh, that's Mrs. Chen feeding her garden guardian. Those things are great for keeping pests away from vegetables. Garden guardian? Kethra spoke up from her position at the monitoring station. Our scans indicate the creature could dissolve titanium with its saliva. Yeah, but it only does that to things that threaten the garden. Mrs. Chen raised it from an egg, so it sees her as family. The aliens exchanged looks that clearly said they thought humans were completely insane. Your species shows no recognition of appropriate threat response, Dr. Yulvan stated. You consistently approach creatures that should trigger every survival instinct you possess. Maybe that's because we define survival differently than you do, Jake suggested. You see a dangerous animal and think about how to avoid it or kill it. We see a dangerous animal and think about how to understand it. Understanding does not stop claws from cutting or teeth from biting, Zixtal pointed out. No, but it helps you know when the claws and teeth are likely to be used. Most animals don't attack without reason. They attack when they're scared, or hungry or protecting their territory. If you can read their body language and give them what they need, they usually leave you alone. Usually? Kethra's scales turned pale blue. Nothing's ever certain when you're dealing with wild animals, but the same could be said about dealing with people, or alien species, or really anything in life. Zixtal pulled up another video, this, one showing a human swimming with creatures that looked like living submarines. The beasts were easily 50 feet long and covered with razor-sharp fins. These aquatic predators show hunting behavior patterns consistent with species that consume anything in their territory, he said. Those are whale sharks, Jake explained. They're actually filter feeders. They eat tiny plants and animals that float in the water. They're completely harmless to humans. They are enormous. So? Size doesn't always equal danger. A mosquito is tiny, but it can carry diseases that kill people. A whale shark is huge, but it won't hurt you unless you get in the way of its fins by accident. The conversation continued for hours, with the aliens showing video after video of humans interacting with Earth's most dangerous creatures. Each time, Jake had a simple explanation that made perfect sense to him, but sounded like madness to the aliens. Finally, Zixtal sat back in his chair and stared at the human across from him. Your people have completely redefined our understanding of courage, he said slowly. It's not really courage, Jake replied. Courage is doing something despite being afraid. Most of the time, we're not afraid because we understand what we're dealing with. But how did your species develop this understanding? How did you learn to read the behavior of creatures that could kill you before you could learn from them? Jake thought about this question for a long moment. I guess it started with necessity. Early humans couldn't outrun most predators, and we didn't have the natural weapons to fight them. So we had to get smart. We learned to watch and listen and understand. We figured out which animals were actually dangerous and which ones just looked scary. And the ones that were actually dangerous, we learned to give them space and respect. Sometimes we learned to work with them. A wolf might be dangerous if you threaten its pack, but if you can prove you're not a threat, sometimes you can even become part of the pack. Kethra made a sound that might have been laughter or terror. You made predators into companions. Dogs are descended from wolves, Jake said with a smile. Cats used to be wild hunters before they decided human homes were more comfortable than caves. Even some of our most dangerous animals can become friends if you approach them the right way. This is impossible, Yulvan muttered. Evolution does not work this way. Maybe evolution works differently on Earth, Jake suggested. Or maybe other species just never tried to understand their predators instead of fighting them. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert from the ship's communication system. Zixtal activated the main screen and Admiral Hayes appeared, speaking from the Galactic Council chambers. Commander Zixtal, we need you to return to Council space immediately. Something is happening that requires human expertise. What kind of something? Zixtal asked. The kind that makes Lisa slapping that creature look like a minor diplomatic incident, Hayes replied grimly. On the screen behind her, red warning lights were flashing, and aliens were running in all directions. Sir, Kethra said, checking her instruments. I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching Council space. Multiple contacts, all showing as extremely hostile. Jake looked at the readings and whistled softly. Looks like you're about to find out if our way of handling dangerous creatures works on a galactic scale. Zixtal felt a chill run through his body as he realized what was coming. The universe was about to test whether humanity's impossible methods could work against threats that had destroyed entire civilizations. The real test was just beginning. The Void Hunters arrived like a storm made of living nightmares. Their ships were not built from metal and circuits like normal spacecraft. Instead, they were grown from the bones and flesh of conquered worlds, massive biovessels that pulsed, with dark energy and dripped acid into the vacuum of space. Commander Zixtal watched the enemy fleet approach through his ship's sensors and felt fear like he had never known before. The Void Hunters had destroyed 17 civilizations across the galaxy. Entire species had been consumed, their worlds stripped bare and left as floating graveyards. How many ships? He asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. 300 biovessels, Kethra reported, her voice shaking. Each one larger than our biggest battleships. They're heading directly for Earth. The Galactic Council fleet had assembled near Earth's moon, over 1,000 ships from dozens of different species. It was the largest military force in galactic history, but it still looked small compared to the approaching darkness. Admiral Hayes appeared on the communication screen from her flagship. Behind her, human officers were working calmly at their stations, as if facing galactic extinction was just another day at work. Commander Zixtal, she said, the Council fleet is ready to begin evacuation procedures. We can save perhaps 10% of Earth's population before the Void Hunters arrive. Admiral, my people stand ready to assist with the evacuation, Zixtal replied, though I fear it will not be enough. To his surprise, Admiral Hayes smiled. Thank you for the offer, Commander, but we won't be needing evacuation services today. You won't be needing. Zixtal could not finish the sentence. Admiral, those are Void Hunters. They have never been defeated. Their bioweapons will consume your entire planet. Probably not, Hayes said calmly. But we appreciate your concern. The communication ended, leaving the alien bridge in stunned silence. Did she just refuse evacuation? Dr. Yulvin asked. The humans are staying to fight, Ben Carter said from his position at the weapons console. He had requested permission to join the defense, but Admiral Hayes had ordered him to remain on the observation ship. Fight with what? Kethra demanded. Earth's military technology is primitive compared to Void Hunter bioships. Their weapons cannot penetrate Void Hunter armor. Maybe they have a plan we don't know about, Jake Morrison suggested, though he sounded uncertain for the first time since they had met him. The Void Hunters reached Earth's outer atmosphere and began releasing their bioweapons. Massive creatures fell from the sky like drops of liquid death. Each one was designed to cause maximum terror, with too many teeth, too many claws, and bodies that violated every natural law of biology. The creatures were the size of skyscrapers, covered in acid-dripping spines with eyes that glowed like burning coals. They had destroyed the armies of 17 civilizations. They were living weapons that fed on fear and despair. The alien observers watched through their telescopes as the first wave of bioweapons crashed into Earth's oceans. Massive splashes sent waves racing toward the coastlines. The water boiled, where the creatures landed. This is horrible, Kethra whispered. Those poor humans. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of running in terror, humans began approaching the landing sites. Scientists with notebooks appeared on beaches. News reporters set up cameras. Children pointed excitedly at the massive shapes moving in the water. Captain Rick Johnson of the Earth Defense Force stood on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, watching through binoculars as the first Void Hunter bioweapon swam toward shore. "What do you think, Lieutenant Davis?" he asked his second-in-command. "Looks like some kind of space whale, sir," Davis replied. "Maybe 100 feet long, lots of tentacles, really ugly teeth. Bigger than a blue whale, then." "Yes, sir, much bigger." "Well, we've handled blue whales before." Rick lowered his binoculars and picked up his radio. "All units, this is Captain Johnson. We have incoming visitors who probably don't know our local customs. Let's go introduce ourselves and make them feel welcome." The alien observers watched in amazement as human military units moved toward the bioweapons, not with tanks and missiles, but with boats and scientific equipment. Marine biologists waded into the surf to get closer looks at the creatures. Coast Guard vessels approached the monsters with rescue equipment, as if they thought the aliens might need help. On the Void Hunter command ship, Hivemind Prime felt something it had never experienced before: confusion. The bioweapons were sending back reports that made no sense. The terror creatures were designed to cause panic and despair in their victims. Fear was their weapon, and they fed on the emotional energy of terrified populations. But the humans were not afraid. Instead, they seemed curious. One of the bioweapons, a massive thing with shark-like teeth and octopus tentacles, had been approached by a small human boat. The humans on the boat were making friendly sounds and offering something called fish as a welcoming gift. The bioweapon tried to look more threatening. It raised its tentacles and opened its massive mouth to show rows of deadly teeth. The humans responded by taking pictures and making excited noises. "Wow, look at those teeth," one of the humans said. "This guy must be the top predator where he comes from." "Should we try to communicate with it?" asked another human. "Definitely. Maybe it's hungry. These things probably had a long journey to get here." The bioweapon was completely confused. It had been created to inspire terror, but these creatures were treating it like a new neighbor who needed a welcome basket. Similar scenes were playing out across the planet. The Void Hunter bioweapons found themselves being studied, photographed, and in some cases offered food by the very creatures they were supposed to terrorize. Dr. Emma Rodriguez, a marine biologist from California, was in a small rubber boat next to a creature that looked like a cross between a dragon and a submarine. The monster was easily the size of a city block, with armor plating that could deflect starship weapons. "Hey there, big guy," Emma said, holding out a bucket of fish. "You look hungry. Want to try some Earth food?" The creature stared at her with eyes the size of dinner tables. It had been programmed to consume and destroy, but something about the small human's behavior was triggering different responses. She showed no fear, no aggression, just curiosity and kindness. Slowly, almost carefully, the massive creature lowered its head toward the boat. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth that could bite through steel, but instead of attacking, it gently took the offered fish. "Good boy," Emma said, patting the creature's snout. "See? Earth food isn't so bad." On the Void Hunter command ship, Hivemind Prime was experiencing what humans might call a nervous breakdown. The bioweapons were not conquering the planet. They were being domesticated. The psychological warfare that had broken 17 civilizations was failing completely. The creatures designed to inspire primal terror were being treated like lost pets who needed care and attention. "Commander," Kethra said, her voice filled with wonder, "the Void Hunter bioweapons are not attacking." "What do you mean, not attacking?" Zixtal demanded. "I mean, they are not attacking. The humans are. They are feeding them, and the creatures appear to be enjoying it." Jake Morrison was laughing so hard he could barely speak. "They're doing it again," he managed to say between gasps. "They're treating galactic superweapons like stray animals that need help." The war that was supposed to last hours became an impromptu first contact celebration. The Void Hunter bioweapons, deprived of the fear and terror they needed to function, began responding to human kindness with something resembling affection. News reports showed scenes that would be remembered forever. Children teaching baby Void Hunters how to play fetch. Fishermen sharing their catch with creatures from beyond the stars. Scientists taking notes while massive aliens posed for photographs. The Void Hunters themselves were forced to land their bioships and try to understand what had gone wrong with their invasion. They found humans waiting on the beaches with welcome signs and offer of food and shelter. "Your species," Admiral Hayes said to Zixtal over the communication link. Spent thousands of years trying to fight the Void Hunters. We just asked them if they wanted to be friends instead. And they said yes? Eventually. Turns out they were just hungry and far from home. Once we figured out what they liked to eat and gave them a safe place to rest, they became quite pleasant company. 6 months later, Earth had become the unofficial capital of the galaxy. The Void Hunters had established colonies in Earth's oceans, where they discovered that humans made excellent partners for exploring the deep sea. The Galactic Council moved its headquarters to Earth orbit, finally understanding that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or technology. It was their ability to look at the universe's most dangerous predators and see friends who just needed someone to understand them. Lisa Park's wildlife documentary about the Void Hunters became the most popular educational program in galactic history. Her techniques for interspecies communication and behavioral modification were now taught at universities across the galaxy. And whenever young aliens asked how humans had become the galaxy's peacekeepers, the answer was always the same. Sometimes, the best way to stop a monster is to realize it was never a monster at all. It was just another creature that needed to learn how to get along with its neighbors. The slap that started it all, ache.